Welcome to De Montfort University's Game Art and Design course bootcamp. This 4-week segment will be an introduction to the absolute basic skills you need in order to create 3D assets over the duration of the course. For this, you'll be using 3D Studio Max to create 3D objects which will be expected to function in a real-time games environment. 3ds Max, for those of you that don't know, is the industry standard 3D modeling package which we'll be using. In this lesson, you'll be learning about the interface, some of the basic tools, and you'll be doing a little bit of modeling at the end. This will be in preparation for the second lesson, in which you'll be expanding your tool set and modeling the Warhammer asset. In lessons 3 and 4, you'll be learning how to map textures onto the surface of your models so that you can make a complete asset. And that'll be in preparation for more projects that will be coming later on in the year. So without further ado, let's go on to a tour of the interface. So up in the top left-hand corner, you've got the Max button, which is basically a glorified file button. If I click on that, you can see that we've got a new button, open button, save button, which functions very much like you'd expect. We've got the menu bar, which is a range of drop-down menus that will allow you access to various functions within 3D Studio Max. You've got the toolbar beneath that, which has a suite of editing tools and various kind of functions related to the editing tools. We've got the command rollout bar over on the right-hand side, which has the create and modify tabs. You'll be using these probably most of the time when you're making your 3D assets. Down at the bottom, you've got the timeline, which basically is used for putting together animations over a sequence. You've got the lower interface down here, so that includes the XYZ gauge coordinates right here. You've got some extended animation features, and you've got a few kind of like camera features down here as well. Last but not least, you have the viewports in the middle here. At the moment, it's set to 4 configuration, which is how you'd expect to look when you open Max for the first time. So basically that consists of the perspective viewport here. You can have front, top and left views here. If I hover my mouse in this viewport here and hit Alt-W, that will actually extend this up into a full screen. And we can navigate around that. If I press Alt-W again, that will take it back into a 4 window view. Right, so let's start by kind of learning how to navigate around the viewports. So I've got an asset open here. It's a little wooden table that you'll be making at the end of this lesson. So if I go into the first camera view, here's a model that we've worked up, and if I go into the second camera view, this is the simplified model that you'll be making towards the end of the lesson. In order to navigate around this, what I can do is I can use the middle mouse wheel. If I click and hold that down, then I can pan the camera around quite easily. If I roll the mouse wheel in and out, I can zoom in and out on my view, on my selection there. And if I use the Alt key and the middle mouse button held down, then that will allow me to rotate around any selections that I make. When I make a selection, I can hit the Z key, and that will actually zero in on it and focus the camera just on that one item. And you'll notice that the camera rotates around that and zooms in on that particular selection. So I can just grab selections and hit Z in order to kind of zero in on them, which makes navigating around the viewport very easy indeed. Okay, further hotkeys that we can use to navigate around. I should point out that during this course we will be teaching you a lot of keyboard shortcuts. It makes for much speedier modeling and navigation around the viewport. And the aim in the games industry and in a production environment is for speed. So we'll be referring to these quite extensively. So in order to navigate around the viewport, you can hit the F button to go into the front view. You can hit the L button, that will take you into the left view. T, obviously that's the top view. B for bottom. And you'll notice that when I pop into some of these views, it goes into an orthographic viewpoint. So basically it has no perspective whatsoever. If you'd like to have a perspective view from that, you can hit P, and that will pop it into a perspective view. And hitting U will take it back into non-perspective view or orthographic view again. so I can hit F, L to go into those various views. And just to kind of reiterate, hitting Alt W will take you into a multiple kind of viewport view. So this is quite useful. You can look at your perspective view down here. But what it also allows you to do is to work from multiple different perspectives at the same time. So I could be working in the front viewport here, but also keep an eye on how how my model's looking in the left view and also the top views as well. So it's quite useful for working to blueprints, to reference images, and so on and so forth. Also, basically, if I hit Alt W, whichever viewport that my mouse is hovering over will be expanded. So if I go over to the left viewport here, hit Alt W, it'll expand that. Back again, top, perspective. So that's it's quite quick and easy to use. Okay, so now that we've covered that, I can also show you the view cube up in the top right-hand corner as well, which is a useful visual aid for navigating around the viewports. If I right-click on that, I can make it a little bit larger for you. So let's go for normal, apply. Okay, so you can see it a little bit better now. And it's comprised of two parts. You've got the cube sitting on top of a compass shape there. So what I can do is I can grab the compass view, and if I click and hold that, I can drag it around, and the camera will basically rotate around whatever object we've got selected nicely and cleanly. Also, I can click on various letters around the compass grid. So if I hit north there, it'll navigate itself into the north point of view. The cube that sits on top of it has different words on each face. So on this one, we've got back. So if I click on that, it will take me into the back view. Also, it has arrows that point to adjacent faces as well. So if I click on this one, it will take us into the left view. Again, front view and the right-hand view. I can go into the top views very easily from here as well. So it's a nice little visual tool that's come into the software fairly recently, and it will allow you to not only navigate the viewports, but also serve as a visual reminder of sort of whereabouts you are in relation to your scene, which can be very handy if you've got quite dense scenes. Okay, so that's the viewport compass right there. Last thing to cover for the viewports is this little menu down here, which allows you to look at a palette for different kind of like viewport configurations. So if I click on this button here, it will give us a different kind of layout. So I've got my perspective view over here. Top, front, and left views are stacked over on the left-hand side. Other viewports that I can have the top viewport up at the top here, and basically you can have a number of different configurations. If I drag my mouse down to the border between these different windows as well, I can actually drag the borders between them so that I can really kind of tailor how I want my viewports to be configured. It's useful for different projects. It depends on what you're tackling. So again, if I hit Alt W, that will take it back to full screen view, and we can focus on that. Okay, so moving on, we're going to have a look at the Create tab now. So first thing we're going to do is, if you go up to the 3D Studio Max button here, and I'd like you to click on New. That will give us a brand new scene to work in. Hit G if you cannot see the grid. If you can see the grid, it'll make it disappear. So basically the G button hides and unhides the grid. This is what we're going to be creating our primitives onto. Primitive is basically a very, very simple 3D geometric shape that we use as a starting point for modeling. So if you have a look at the Create tab up here, there are a number of buttons underneath the tab. We're going to be looking at the geometry one, but there are shapes and lights and cameras and all sorts of crazy stuff that you can have a look at. Under each one of these buttons, you've got a drop-down menu which has even more objects that you can explore. And under each one of those, you've got a number of buttons as well. So basically, you've got 7 times however many are in the menu times however many buttons are under each one of these selected options here. So basically, that's hundreds of features for you to explore. So I would say take a bit of time and have a good look through the Create tab and familiarize yourself with some of the shapes and the functions that you could be using in your projects. It'll make things a lot easier later on. So what we're going to be looking at first of all is creating a simple box. Okay, so what I want you to do is to click on the box, the button will highlight, and you'll notice that a number of parameters appear over in the command rollout. We're not interested in those just yet, but what I want you to do is go across to your grid, and you're going to hold down the left mouse button, and you're going to drag out the base of your box like that. So while you hold down the mouse button, you can kind of basically reshape the base all willy-nilly and make it whatever shape you want to. When you're happy with the size of the base of the box, release the button, and that will define the height of the box as well. So you can drag that up and down until you're happy. Click again to finalize that, and there you have your box. But we're not done yet. You can go across to your parameters now, and you can really kind of dial in your length, width, and height parameters until you're happy with the size of your box. Best way to redefine these parameters is if you go over to the up and down arrows here. You can click on these little arrows individually, but if you hold down your mouse button on there, the left mouse button, you can drag them up and down like that, which makes it a lot easier than just kind of like clickety-click all the time. So, right, happy with the shape of that. Just below the parameters, the length, width, and height parameters, we have the length, width, and height segments. So what you can do is you can actually add geometry along the length of the box, the width, and the height, and you can even dial these down to 1 per side. So you can make the box as geometry heavy or light as you need it to be for your project. Okay, so that's how you create a box. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit the delete key to get rid of that, and we're going to move on to creating a sphere. So the method of creating primitives is like a staged process. So for the box, we had to drag out the base and then release and drag it up. That was a 2-staged process. For the sphere, it's a lot simpler. It's a 1-staged process. You click and drag, and that will just define the radius of the sphere. You can drag that out until you're happy with the size of it, release the mouse button, and you're done. If you need to tweak it, you can come across to the parameters and you can play around with the radius there. You can also dial up and down the segments as well, so you can dial it all the way down to a very, very simple geometric solid, or you can take it all the way up and give it a lot of geometry and make a very, very smooth sphere. There's various other options here as well, but play around with those in your own time. And there's all sorts of effects that you can create. Right, okay, we're done with the sphere now, so I'm going to hit delete to get rid of that, and the last one we're going to play with is the cylinder for now. Again, in your own time, come back and have a go at the menu and explore some of these other parameters here. You can even make a teapot. Right, so to create the cylinder, click in the middle, drag that out. That will define the base, release the button, and drag it up. So that's a 2-staged process right there. And again, we've got the usual parameters. You can play around with the radius, the height. You can play around with the height segments as well. There's also cap segments, so you can add geometry to those if you need to. And you can also dictate the number of sides as well, so you can drag that all the way down to a triangle or a square, or you can make a very smooth round cylinder like so. Okay, so hit delete and get rid of that. Okay, so next I'm going to be covering the gizmos. What are the gizmos, you ask? Well, I'm going to demonstrate. So first thing we need to do is to create a box. So I'm going to click on the box button again, and I'm going to drag out a box for us, like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the W key so that you can see better what the gizmos are. So you'll notice that at the base of any shape that you create in 3D Studio Max, you have this axis that's been created right here. This is the pivot point. Every object that you create will have a pivot point, and this basically dictates where the shape is in space. And we can manipulate the orientation of any shape that we create. We can rotate it, we can move it, we can scale it up and down. And the tool that we use to do that is called the Gizmo tool, which we're going to be looking at now. So if you hit the W key, you will get the move gizmo up. Pretty intuitive. You've got like a gizmo that has a bunch of arrows on the outside. Notice that when I rotate around, the gizmo stays orientated to the space within the viewports. Right. So as you can see, the move gizmo is comprised of a number of different segments. You've got the arrows around the outside, and then around the inside, you've got these little kind of planes that stay orientated to various orientations in the the space as well. And there's also this little square right at the confluence of the axes right there. First thing we're going to cover is how to move the box along these axes. So you've got the X, Y, and Z axes here. If I hover my mouse over the X axis, you'll notice that the arrow goes yellow. It highlights, and you can drag the shape just along that axis right there. If I do the same with the Y axis, I can do that, and I can do the same with the Z axis too. Again, if you want to kind of move something and then you've made a mistake and you want to move it back to its original position, you can press Control Z, which will undo anything that you've done. So that basically is like a backspace for you to get out of any errors. Those are the arrows around the outside, and they allow you to move in one plane of movement. If you hover your mouse now over some of the little boxes towards the center, the little planes that hover between the arrows, you'll notice that they highlight two of the arrows here. So if I hover over this one, this is between the Z and the Y axis, and that will allow you to basically move the box around just along that plane. So it will not move along the X axis at all. It just moves along the Z, Y kind of plane of movement, like so. And that's the function of these planes. They allow you to move it in just sort of a two-dimensional space. So this is the ZX axis, and you've got one for the XY axis, which will move it along the floor space as well. So I'll Control Z just to move it back to its original position. And the third part is this little box just on the sort of where the axes meet in the middle. And if I click on that and drag it around, what it does is it actually moves the box around parallel to your screen, your view. So it's treating your camera as a plane for it to move around in. So that's what that part does. Okay, I'm going to hit the E button now, and that will bring up the rotational gizmo. So it's a sphere, as you can see, and it has a number of circles which dictate its axes. So the yellow one here is basically the Z-axis, the floor plane. Then you've got one for the X-axis here, and the Y-axis. That will allow you to rotate it all over the place. And you'll notice that there's also like a circle around the outside as well. This is similar to the screen space, kind of like square in the previous gizmo. It allows you to rotate basically at 90 degrees to your view as well. So it will treat your view as an axis. So if I Control Z that back and move around to like a different view, it will rotate from that point of view as well. Okay, and that's the rotational gizmo there. So if I hit R now on my keyboard, I'll bring up the scale gizmo. So this has axes going around the outside as well. If I grab one of those and click my mouse button on it and drag it, it will scale just in a particular plane of movement. So that's the Z-axis. You can also scale it in the X-axis and the Y-axis as well. Okay, so around the interior, you'll notice that there are two triangles. So if I go to the outer edge of the triangles, you'll notice that it's highlighting to the axes. So similarly, it scales just along a particular plane, the ZY plane, in this example, and it will just scale it in and out along that plane. You can also do the Y X-axis, and you can do the Z X-axis as well. Pretty self-explanatory. And if you want to do a uniform scale, you can move your mouse right to the center here, and basically that will scale up all axes uniformly at the same time as well. I should mention that the scale gizmo actually has some extended features up on the toolbar here. So you'll notice that there are buttons up here that will bring up the gizmo as well. If I click on this one, it brings up the move gizmo. This one, the rotation, and this one, the scale gizmo as well. If I hold down my mouse button on the scale gizmo, it actually brings up a drop-down menu. The top two buttons here are pretty much the same when you're using the gizmo to transform, which we are. However, this bottom one will change the behavior of your gizmo, and what it does is it actually kind of squashes the shape, as you can see. So when I try and scale it, it will try and maintain the volume of the primitive, but it will kind of squash and stretch the shape of it. So if you want it to scale in kind of like a rational, uniform kind of way, then go up to your button here, hold down the left-hand button, click on one of these top two, and you should be able to scale it normally again. Okay, so we've just covered how to make edits to the box in terms of sort of moving it around, rotating it, resizing it. But we can actually go deeper, and we can make edits to the actual geometry of the box itself. So we're going to cover that in the next section. So what I want you to do is, with the box created in the center of the grid, I want you to right-click on the box and go to Convert To, and then click on Convert to Editable Poly. Okay, so click on that, and what you'll notice straight away is that the command rollout has changed now. It's switched from the Create tab over to the Modify tab, and you've got a whole load of different menu-y goodness underneath that. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to rename our box, because Max will basically just assign generic names to everything. Box 001, 002, so on and so forth. And what we want to do is, whenever you create something in your scene, you want to give it a unique name, most likely in line with the naming convention for whatever project you're working on. For this though, I'm just going to call this one my box. Okay, so once you've done that, very important to name your objects. We're going to go through sort of the different ways that you can kind of make selections on your box, and sort of what it's made up of, basically. So you'll notice that under the selection menu here, you've got 5 little buttons, one with vertex, edge, border, polygon, and element. So I'm going to click on the first one, which is vertex, and you'll notice that your box has little blue dots at the corners where all of the edges kind of converge, and these are called vertexes. So what I can do is I can click on them and select them directly by left clicking on them. And what I can also do is I can, if I start outside in space, hold down the mouse button and drag, I can marquee select them. So what I can do is I can select a number of them by marquee selecting in and creating like a little rectangle around them. And also I can select more than one by clicking on them. By holding the control button down, I can select a number of them, like so. And I can also deselect from this selection as well, one at a time, by holding the Alt button down. So if I click on that, I can deselect these. Okay, so I'll deselect these ones down at the bottom. If you click out in space, it'll get rid of your selection. So if I select these 2 buttons here, I can actually drag those in. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So right, those are the vertexes. If I click on edge now, that will actually start to select edges. So you can do the same here. If you hold control, you can actually select more than one. You can marquee select them, and you can also use the Alt button to deselect from your selection as well. So select, select. And basically edges form between anywhere there are vertexes. So if you have a vertex here and here, the edge is what connects them. So that's that. Okay, we've got the border button. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete a face off here quickly to demonstrate what the border selection does. Whenever you've got like an open face on your shape, you can actually select in a border loop like this using the border button. In my experience, it doesn't have a huge amount of applications, but we're just pointing it out for you here. If I Control Z, I can recreate my face again. It basically takes us back a couple of steps and makes it like I never deleted the face in the first place. If I click on the 4th button along, the polygon button, what it means is that you can select faces now. So if I click on here, it'll select the faces and highlight them in red. If I hold the control button, I can select more than one. If I hold the Alt button, I can deselect from that selection. Again, I can use the marquee selection in order to select a number of them at a time. And the last button is the element button, which will basically select any contiguous shape. So say I had an asset that was made up of sort of a number of boxes, 3 or 4 of them put together, but they were actually separate shapes. I can use the element to pick between them very easily. Okay, so now that we've covered that, what we can do is we can actually start to make changes to these selections using the gizmos. So if I go back to vertex selection, what I can do is I can select any of these using the number buttons on my keyboard as shortcuts. So I can select between, if I hit 1, that will take me into vertex mode. If I hit 2, that will take me into edge mode. If I hit 3, border mode, 4, face mode, and 5 will take me into element select mode. So let's select vertex selection mode by hitting 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select some of these vertexes here. I'm going to use the gizmo in order to change where they are. So as you can see, I can make selections into my shape, and I can use the gizmo in order to adjust those, like so. I can rotate those by hitting the E key. I can bring up my rotation gizmo, and I can change how these vertexes are orientated using that. And I can hit the R key, and I can scale them up and down as well. So you're starting to see in each of these modes you can actually make a vast array of edits to your shape. Let's go into edge selection mode by hitting 2, and I'll select a couple of edges here, and we can do the same thing. So if I hit W, I can bring up my move gizmo, and I can move some of the edges in. I can rotate them, and I can also scale them up and down as I need to. Again, to get rid of those edits, I can press Ctrl Z, and I can take the box back to its original state. I'll skip the border selection and go straight to face selection mode. And it's the same deal here. I can select the face, and I can move it around. I can rotate it, and I can scale it up and down as I need to as well. And then if I hit 5, go into element mode, then I can make the same changes there. I can translate it, I can rotate it, and I can scale it up and down as I need to as well. Okay, so in the next section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate some of the tools that you'll need for the next section. We just covered kind of what the sub-selection kind of levels do, the vertexes, edge modes, and so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover one of the more common tools, which is extrude, and another tool, which is the attach option, which you'll need for making the simple stylized table and chairs that we demonstrated at the beginning of the lesson. So without further ado, what I'll do is I'll hit this button over here to go into vertex selection mode, and all of the tools will pop up underneath it. So beneath that you've got the extrude button. Extrude is a tool that occurs under vertex mode, edge mode, and under face selection mode as well. So I'll demonstrate it all in all 3 modes, and what we'll do is we'll see how it affects our box differently in each mode. So what I'll do is I'll marquee select the top 4 vertexes in our box here to begin with. Then I'll move my mouse down to the extrude tool and click on the settings button next to it to bring up the menu. So you get the floating menu. You can move that around by grabbing the name tag here and moving that around in space just so it's out of the way. And you'll notice that the vertexes have actually kind of extruded out. So from where all of the vertexes were, you've got these little kind of like pyramid style projections coming out. And what you can do is you can actually you can influence their shape using the gauges on the floating menu here. So if I grab these arrows and left click and drag them up and down, you'll notice that this top gauge actually affects the distance out from the base that it extrudes. and the gauge below it actually affects the width of the base. So you can drastically kind of like influence the shape using those. And once you're happy with the transformation, you can hit the tick here in order to confirm it, or you can hit the cross to cancel it as well. We're going to cancel it this time because we want to make different selections later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edge mode. You can actually use the number keys, so I'm going to start doing that from now on. So I'm going to hit 2 to go into edge selection mode, and I'm going to select through the shape in order to select all of the edges there. And you'll notice up here we've got the extrude button again. So clicking on the menu button next to the extrude button will bring up the menu again. Again, we've got 2 gauges here. So if I dial up the first one, that affects the distance from the base, and the other one below actually affects the width of the extrusion base as well. So again, you've got a number of different kind of options with that. Again, I'm going to hit cross there so as not to confirm it. And last but not least, we've got face selection mode here as well. So if I zoom out a little bit, I can use the middle mouse button to zoom out, and we've got our extrude button down here. So I'll click on that, and as you can see, it starts to extrude out. This time we've got a different configuration for the menu button, and I'll demonstrate what the difference is in just a second. We've got some options up here that we can select from, but just this one gauge that we have here affects the distance out. That's it. You can't actually affect the width, the base of the extrusion for this one. While we have the extrude menu there, we can actually select other faces as well. So if I click on this and this face here, you'll notice that it starts to extrude from our new selection there. So it's basically grabbed those 3 faces and it's extruding up diagonally from our selection, as you can see here. And this is where our top button actually comes into play, because we have different kind of styles of extrusion that we can affect here. So if I click on this, we are currently in group extrusion mode, so it's extruding the whole selection as a group. If I select local normal, what it does is rather than kind of like extrude them all out at their usual size, it takes the entire selection and it blows it up, and it tries its best to kind of move the entire selection out directly from the face. As you can see, it's a little bit skewed, which can be a bit of a problem, but that's the effect that you can get. So if you're looking for this kind of exploded kind of effect, then it's useful for that. And the last option is by polygon as well. So if I click on that, that's pretty obvious. The faces all extrude out separately as individual faces rather than being treated as a continual surface. So those are the 3 options when you extrude out using face extrude mode. Okay, so again, to confirm that, you can hit the tick. We're going to hit cross because I need to demonstrate something else for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the attach tool. So if we go to the create tab up here, I'm going to click on box, and I'm going to create a couple of boxes around. Okay, so these boxes are all completely separate. If I go to the modified tab here, we've got our original box, which we've named my box, and we've got boxes 001, which is the first one I created, and 002. What we want to do, though, is we want to attach them all into one object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll my mouse up. I'm going to select my box first, because we want them to be attached to this box. And then I'm going to roll over to the attach button here. If I click on that, it remains activated. And what I can do is I can move my mouse over to the viewport, and now any object that I select is going to be attached to my box. Okay, so if I click on that, it's now attached box number 1 to the original box. You can tell because it's changed to the same color as my box, and they're both highlighted, whereas the one that I haven't selected is still unselected. Attach still remains highlighted, so basically I can keep on going around my scene, clicking on things, and they will still attach to my box. So let's attach that last one there. And what we must remember to do is to deactivate the attach button. Otherwise, what's going to happen is if we've got lots of items in our scene, we're going to keep on attaching them all willy-nilly, and that's not really what we want to do. Okay, so now that they're attached as one object, we can move them around, and they will move as a oneer. We can rotate them all together, and we can size them up and down as well if we need to. If you need to move them independently, then you can do that using your sub-selection mode. So if I hit element, I can hit 5 to go into element selection mode, or it might just completely ignore me. I'll hit the button anyway. And what I can do is I can click on this cube over here, and that means that I can move it independently. So that's really where element comes into its own. So I can move this around, and we can intersect it, and we can bring this up. And pop it into there for whatever reason. Okay, so basically when you've got things attached as well, you may want to detach them as well. So the way to do that is if you make your selection and hit the detach button next to attach, then basically your object will come up with this dialog box. You can detach as object 001. You can rename it here. So let's name it to my box 2. And now you'll notice that this box doesn't have the white lines around the outside. It's actually detached as a separate object now, and I can select that separately and move it separately now as well. There we go. So that's how to attach and detach. And prior to that, we learned how to use the extrude tool as well, which is going to come in very, very useful for the next segment where we learn how to make the table. Okay, so we just covered the tools that you're going to need in order to make the asset that you see in front of you. We previewed this earlier on. And this is just a very simple low poly asset that you can make with some hand painted textures on it. For the purposes of the next segment, what we're going to do is we're going to make a slightly more simplified table. However, if you like the one that you see in front of you, as a stretch goal, you can create this one using some tools that you're going to learn in later lessons down the line. So when you've learned those, feel free to jump ahead if you want to. Come back and attempt to make this set of table and chairs. So if I switch to the next camera, basically what we're going to be making is this table and chair here. So as you can see, a little bit more simplified. It doesn't have the backrest in the back. The bowing isn't present in the table legs or in the chair legs as well, though those can be very easily added a little bit later on down the line. So for the sake of brevity and for simplicity, we're going to be creating this table and chair right here. Okay, so basically what I'm going to be doing first is I'm going to do a quick run through on how I model the table and chairs very quickly. The idea of this is not really to demonstrate what a great model I am, but to demonstrate to you the speed that we and people in the industry would expect you to work out. We don't expect you to be up to this speed just yet, but we do expect you to work with a sense of urgency so that you can develop that speed. So what we don't want to see is you extruding a face out, panning, zooming, rotating around it for half an hour, and then going and getting a coffee. You just need to be a little bit more direct and to work up a head of steam for these kinds of things as well. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to open a new scene up. So if you click on the 3D Studio Max button up here, click on New, don't bother saving the scene, and hit G so you can see your grid. Hit Z so that the camera senses on that. And I'm just going to go through how to model the table and the chair very quickly. Okay, so just watch for now, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through in slow time so that we can cover all the little bits and pieces. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is go to the Create tab and create a little box here. Okay, and there you have it, table and chair. Okay, by no means the fastest speed modeling in the world, but it gives you an idea of the sense of speed that you can be working at. And I mean, when they tell you that you've got a day to make sort of like a set of furniture, it's perfectly achievable, really. What I do from here is I'd probably take a little bit of time to kind of scooch the proportions around, ensure they're the right size, and obviously then I'd play around with the actual silhouettes of the furniture, as you saw in the completed piece as well. We haven't made the tankards in this version, but we'll probably do a little breakout video, or you can come back and do that as a stretch goal later on as well. Okay, so that's the table and chair there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that all out again, and we're going to go through it in slow time so that you can catch every single beat from that. Okay, so that was the fast time recording of the modeling for the table and chair. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through that again in slow time now. So I'm going to go up to the Create tab and create a box for the top of the table, and just drag that out in the grid right here. So roughly those dimensions, and just drag that up. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag out the width segments, so that it's around about that. Okay, I mean, like if you go through the paper document, it gives you some more precise kind of segment details and stuff like that. But it doesn't need to be too accurate, really. It's just a stylized table and a very basic project to get you started. So as long as it looks vaguely like this and your segments are roughly square, you're golden. Okay, so basically from here, what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on the table. It's going to bring up your quad menu, roll down to Convert To, and click on Convert To Editable Poly. Going to hit W, and we're going to raise the table off the deck to around about that height, maybe a little bit lower. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch into face mode. So if I hit 4, and I'm going to select these 4 faces down here, make sure you hit Q so that when you are selecting, you don't accidentally move your selection around. If I hit W and go into the move mode, and I move these around, then it's very easy when you're selecting your faces to accidentally kind of like move these around, which will just horribly mar your model. So just it's worth hitting Q just so that you don't accidentally kind of like move your selections around. On a simple asset like this, it doesn't matter so much, but on something quite complex, it can be something quite heartbreaking, so don't do it. Right, so now that we've got those selected, I'm going to extrude those out so that they meet the floor. So let's extrude those down to about there. Hit the tick to confirm that, and we're going to scale down the feet now as well. Okay, so I've got the feet already selected. I'm going to grab the middle of my my scale tool there, and I'm going to scale those down so they're nice and skinny. Gives the legs a little bit more character. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the options for the scale tool. So if you go up to the toolbar up at the top here, it says use pivot point centers. So basically, it's treating the faces as if they've got separate pivot points. So if I hold down the left button on this this menu and slide down to this little icon here, and I hover over that, it says use selection center. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to average out the selection center for all 4 faces to a central point. And if I just splay them out, there we go. If I use my my scale gizmo, it actually moves those feet out. So we want to basically kind of splay them out a little bit. It gives the table a little bit more character. And what I might do is I'll come back in and I'll scale the feet down a little bit more again, just so they're the kind of size that I want them to be. Okay, I'm happy with that. And that's pretty much the table done now. So, I mean, you'll notice that the top is kind of like very heavily quantified. Normally what we'd do is we'd optimize that down and get rid of a lot of these surplus edges. We'll cover that in later tutorials, but for a beginner's tutorial, this is fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to also name the table my table as well. So very important to always name your assets. It may not always be you that works on your files, so you need to name it so that other people that handle your files can basically handle your files. Right, okay, so let's go back to the Create tab. hitbox, and we'll drag out another one to create our chair. Okay, so the box has been created with the parameters that we used to create our table, so we need to dial that down again. So let's dial that down to around about 4, and this one to around about 4 as well. So that should be fine. Going to right click on that, convert it to an editable poly, and hit 4 so that I go into face mode. I'm going to select these two faces on the top for the back of the chair, and then we're going to select this one for the chair legs, and we're going to extrude that out to around about there. That's fine, and then we'll just check that. Okay, so I'm going to deselect all of the faces there, and we're going to move the chair up to around about there. So it's a little high at the moment, so we'll just scale the chair down a little bit so that our make-believe characters can actually get their legs under the table. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Okay, and we've got our 4 faces already selected, so I'll go back into face selection mode, and we'll do the same thing with the chair as we did with the table, and we'll scale down those faces so that they're a little bit skinnier and the legs are a little bit more tapered. We'll change the mode on the scale tool, and we'll splay it out a little bit more, and we'll just tweak until we're happy with the aesthetics. There we go. Okay, that's fine. And last thing to do is to create a final box for the backrest, so around about that size. And again, not to worry too much about the actual kind of size of it. We can tweak that afterwards. I am going to take the length segments down to about 1 for the length there. Basically, that means that I can put a little kind of like primitive curve into the back of it, so that it looks more like a backrest that's been shaped to accommodate somebody's back. Right, okay, so now that we've got that sorted out, we can move that up here, and I'm going to rotate it into place. Scale it down a little bit, and it's a little bit too long for the chair, so we'll scale that back in there. And that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the chair now, and I'm going to attach the backrest to it. So that's a part of the chair, and what we can do is we can select this here. I'm going to use Alt-L to basically select the entire loop all the way around the chair there, and I'm going to pull that back so that it forms a bit of a backrest. Okay, and that's the chair done as well. So I'm going to angle that around, and the last touch, obviously, I want to have 2 chairs, and there's no point in modeling 2 chairs. So all I need to do is to clone it across. So in order to do that, I can hold down the Shift key, and I can drag that out, and that will create an exact duplicate of the chair. You'll get this menu come up here. Refer to the documents to find out a little bit more information about the difference between copy, instance, and reference. Just to give you a brief overview, a copy will make an independent clone of your chair, which you can modify independently. Instance will basically duplicate any changes you then make from this chair onto the other chair as well. Reference is similar, but again, the documentation will go into more depth on that. Again, from this box, you can also name your chairs as well. So we'll do that right afterwards. Okay, so this chair here, I'm just going to call my chair, and we'll call this one my chair 2. Okay, so that in a nutshell is how you create your table and chair set. They're very, very simple. What you would do next is you would unwrap them and surface them, which is something that you're going to learn how to do in the coming tutorials. This is basically a primer for the boot camp in order to cover sort of like the very basic kind of interface for Macs. It introduced you to the concept of making subselections into objects made from primitives. And we also learned how to model a very, very simple asset, the table and chairs. This is in order to prime you for the next lesson, where you will be expanding your tool set and you'll be learning how to make the awesome rocking Warhammer as well, which is an entirely new level of cool above the table and chair. After that, you'll be learning how to add surface textures to your models. And once you've mastered all of those, you can come back to this. You can unwrap it, and you can start to texture it as well as a stretch goal. So we would encourage you to run ahead, look at the other documents for further lessons if you're interested, and just go for it. Get stuck in, and good luck. See you in the next lesson.